to growing tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran. I'm joined from Washington by Emma Ashford from the US think tank, the Cato Institute. Thanks very much for speaking to us. And obviously, we've been watching developments inside Saudi Arabia very closely over the past few days. We know that President Trump has a strong personal relationship with the Saudi leadership, and he's certainly not been afraid to tweet his support for their recent actions in the country, particularly by the Crown Prince. What impact is that likely to have?
I think Donald Trump's response to this has been very interesting. I think in any normal administration, normal U.S. administration, we would have seen the government take a much more measured stance towards this crisis. The same as we saw back when the Qatar crisis started with the GCC crisis. We have seen Donald Trump make these very intemperate statements on Twitter. We've then seen other members of his cabinet or other U.S. officials try and walk them back and take a more measured approach. And I think to the extent that he's impacting affairs in the Gulf, Donald Trump is pouring gasoline on a fire.
So what might his support for well, first of all, what is at the heart of his bond then with Saudi Arabia? You say that usually the US would take a more measured or more neutral position. Why is that not happening now?
Donald Trump appears to have formed a strong personal connection with Saudi leadership. He had that extremely successful trip to Riyadh earlier in the year. He's had good personal connections with Mohammed bin Salman. His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, visited Saudi Arabia just last week and apparently had excellent meetings with Mohammed bin Salman. And so, like a lot of Trump's foreign policy, this seems to be driven as much by personalities as it does by policy. Trump likes the Saudis, therefore he is backing their leadership in this crisis.
What does that mean for U.S. interests in the region?
Frankly, it's worrying. Saudi Arabia seems to be taking a very assertive, aggressive approach, not just in domestic politics, but towards Iran. And as we have seen in the last several years, we've seen Saudi actions in Yemen be extremely destabilizing. Their actions in Syria have not helped that conflict. And now they appear to have their sights set on Lebanon. None of this is good for regional stability, and that's bad for U.S. interests in the long run.
But does it also perhaps mean there is a greater alignment between US and Saudi interests? A lot of debate right now that with sort of a victory over ISIL in the region, there could be a new set of US priorities, and that could mean a more confrontational approach with Iran.
I think certainly the new administration here in Washington and new leadership in Saudi Arabia share fairly common views on Iran. Donald Trump has taken a very confrontational approach to Iran, decertifying the nuclear deal a couple of weeks ago. He has said that if Congress doesn't take further steps on that, he will do something about it. And so to a certain extent, these Saudi policies are right in line with what Trump has advocated, with what Nikki Haley, his UN ambassador, has advocated. But I think a lot of people, even inside Trump's cabinet, are concerned that this could get out of control. And it's not at all clear if Saudi Arabia decides to challenge Iran in Lebanon or elsewhere, what the end result would be. This could end up like Yemen, a failed war, a humanitarian catastrophe that drags the U.S. further into regional conflicts.
All right. Well, Emma Ashford, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. You're watching Al Jazeera.